Piano. And let us continue with our book. The Lovely Painted Veil. We're in the third part now. Chapter 15. Who would have then who would have thought then that within 3 months they would be on such terms? He had told her since that he was crazy about her on that first evening. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He remembered the dress she wore. It was her wedding dress, and he said that she looked like a lily of the valley. She knew that he was in love with her before he told her, and a little frightened, she kept him at a distance. He was impetuous, and it was difficult. She was afraid to let him kiss her, for the thought of his arms about her made her heart beat so fast. She had never been in love before. It was wonderful. And now that she knew that love was what she felt, a sudden sympathy for the love that Walter bore her. She teased him playfully and saw that he enjoyed it. She had been perhaps a little afraid of him, but now she had more confidence. She chaffed him, and it amused her to see the slow smile which at first he received her banter. He was surprised and pleased. One of these days, she thought, he would become quite human. Now that she had learned something of passion, it diverted her to play lightly, like a harpist running his fingers across the strings of his harp, on his affections. She laughed when she saw how she bewildered and confused him. And when Charlie became her lover, the situation between herself and Walter seemed exquisitely absurd. She could hardly look at him, so grave and self-controlled, without laughing. She was too happy to feel unkindly towards him. Except for him, after all, she would never have known Charlie. She had hesitated some time before the final step, not because she did not want to yield to Charlie's passion. Her own was equal to his, but because her upbringing and all the conventions of her life intimidated her. She was amused afterwards, and the final act was due to accident. Neither of them had seen the opportunity till it was face to face with them, to discover that she felt in no way different from what she had before. She had expected that it would cause some, she hardly knew what, fantastic change in her so that she would feel like somebody else. And when she had a chance to look at herself in the glass, she was bewildered to see the same woman she had seen the day before. "Are you angry with me?" he asked her. "I adore you," she whispered. "Don't you think you are very silly to waste so much time? A perfect fool." Chapter 16. Her happiness, sometimes almost more than she could bear, renewed her beauty. Just before she married, beginning to lose her first freshness, she had looked tired and drawn. The uncharitable say that she was going off, but that is all the difference between a girl of 25 and a married woman of that age. She was like a rosebud that is beginning to turn yellow at the edges of the petals, and then suddenly she was a rose in full bloom. Her starry eyes gained a more significant expression. Her skin, that feature which had always been her greatest pride and most anxious care, was dazzling. It could not be compared to the peach or to the flower it was they demanded comparison with. She looked 18 once more. She was at the height of her glowing loveliness. It was impossible not to remark it, and her women friends asked her in a little friendly asides if she was going to have a baby. The indifferent, who had said that she was just a very pretty woman with a long nose, admitted that they had misjudged her. She was what Charlie had called her the first time they met, a raging beauty. They managed their intrigue with skill. He had a broad back. He told her, "I will not have you schwank about your figure," she interrupted lightly. And it did not matter about him. For her sake, they mustn't take the smallest risk. They could not meet often alone, not half often enough for him, but he had to think of her first. Sometimes in the curio shop, now and then after luncheon in her house, when no one was about, but she saw him a good deal here and there. It amused her then to see the formal way he spoke of her, jovial, for he was always that. But the same matter he used with everyone. Who could imagine, when they heard him chaff her with the charming humor of his, that so lately he had held her in his passionate arms? She worshipped him. He was splendid, in his small, smart top boots and white breeches, when he played polo. In tennis clothes he looks more like a boy. Of course he was proud of his figure. It was the best feature she had seen. He took pains to keep it. He never ate bread or potatoes or butter. He took a great deal of exercise. He liked the care he took of his arms. He was manicured once a week. He was a wonderful athlete, and the year before he had won the local tennis championship. Certainly he was the best dancer she had ever danced with. It was a dream to dance with him. No one would think he was 40. She told him she did not believe it. "I believe it is all a bluff, and you're really 25. He laughed. He was well pleased. "Oh, my dear, I have a boy of 15. I'm a middle-aged gent. In another 2 or 3 years I shall just be a fat old party. You'll be adorable when you're 100. She liked his back, black bushy eyebrows. She wondered whether it was they that gave his blue eyes their disturbing expression. He was full of accomplishments. He could play the piano quite well, ragtime, of course, and he could sing a comic tune with a rich voice and a good humor. She did not believe there was anything he could not do. He was very clever at his work, too, and she shared his pleasure when he told her that the governor had particularly congratulated him on the way he had done some difficult job. "Although it is I, as I said," he laughs, his eyes charming with the love he bore her, "there is not a fellow in the service who could have done it better." Oh, how she wished that she were his wife rather than Walter's. And he would cheat on her with someone else. That's how it goes. Chapter 17. Of course, it was not certain yet that Walter knew the truth, and if he did not If he didn't, it was better perhaps to leave well alone. But if he did, well, in the end, it would be the best thing for all of them. At first she had been, if not satisfied, at least resigned to seeing Charlie only by stealth. But time had increased her passion, and for some while now she had been increasingly impatient of the obstacles which prevented them from being always together. He had told her so often that he cursed his position, which forced him to be so discreet. The ties which bound him, and the ties which bound her. How marvellous it would have been, he said, if they were both free. She saw his point of view. No one wanted a scandal, and, of course, it required a good deal of thinking over before you changed the course of your life. But if freedom were thrust upon them, then how simple everything would be. It was not as though any one would suffer very much. She knew exactly what his relations were with his wife. She was a cold woman, and there had been no love between them for years. It was habit that held them together, convenience, and of course the children. It was easier for Charlie than for her. Walter loved her. But after all, he was absorbed in his work, and a man always has his club. He might be upset at first, but he would get over it. There was no reason why he should not marry somebody else. Charlie had told her that he could not make out how she came to throw herself away on Walter Fane. She wondered, half smiling, why, a little while before, she had been terrified of the thought that Walter had caught them. Of course, it was the startling to see the handle of the door slowly turn. But after all, they knew the worst that Walter could do, and they were ready for it. Charlie would feel as a greater relief as she that they both desired more than anything in the world should be thus forced upon them. Walter was a gentleman. She would do him the justice to acknowledge that, and he loved her. He would do the right thing and allow her to divorce him. They had made a mistake, and the lucky thing was they had found it out before it was too late. She made up her mind exactly what she was going to say to him and how she would treat him. She would be kind, smiling, and firm. There was no need for them to quarrel, but later on she would always be glad to see him. She hoped honestly that the 2 years they had spent together would remain with him as a priceless memory. I don't suppose Dorothy Tanzen will mind divorcing Charlie a bit, she thought. Now the youngest boy is going back to England, it will be much nicer for her to be in England too. There is absolutely nothing for her to do in Chingyen. She'll be able to spend all the holidays with the boys. And then she's got her father and mother in England. It was all simple, and everything could be managed without scandal or ill feeling. And when she and Charlie could marry, then Kitty drew a long sigh. They would be very happy. It was worth going through a certain amount of bother to achieve that. Confusedly, one picture jostling another, she thought of the life they would lead together, of the fun they would have, and the little journey they would take together, the house they would live in, the position he would rise to, and the help she would be to him. He would be very proud of her, and she adored him. But through all these daydreams ran a current of apprehension. It was funny. It was as though the wood and the strings of an orchestra played Arcadian melodies, and in the bass of the drums, softly, but with a foreboding, beat a grim tattoo. Sooner or later Walter must come home, and her heart beat fast at the thought of meeting him. It was strange that he had gone away that afternoon without saying a word to her. Of course she was not frightened of him. After all, what could he do? She repeated to herself, but she could not quite allay her uneasiness. Once more she repeated that she would say what she would say to him. What was the good of making a scene? She was very sorry. Heaven knows she didn't want to cause him pain, but she couldn't keep it if she did not love him. She couldn't help it. It was no good receding, and it was always better to tell the truth. She hoped he wouldn't be unhappy, but they had made a mistake, and the only sensible thing was to acknowledge it. She would always think kindly of him. But even as she said this to herself, a sudden gust of fear made the sweat start out in the palms of her hands, and because she was frightened, she grew angry with him. If he wanted to make a scene, that was his lookout. He must not be surprised if he got more than he bargained for. She would tell him that she had never cared two pence for him, and that not a day had passed since their marriage without her regretting it. He was dull. Oh, how he bored her. Bored her, bored her. He thought himself so much better than anyone else. It was laughable. He had no sense of humor. She hated his supercilious air, his coldness, and his self-control. It was easy to be self-controlled when you are interested in nothing and nobody but yourself. He was repulsive to her. She hated to let him kiss her. What had he to do? What had he to be so conceited about? He danced rottingly. He was a wet blanket at a party. He couldn't play or sing. He couldn't play polo, and his tennis was no better than anybody else's. Bridge? Who cared about bridge? Kitty worked herself up into a towering passion. Let him dare to reproach her. All that had happened was his own fault. She was thankful that he knew the truth at last. She hated him and wished never to see him again. Yes, she was thankful that it was all over. Why couldn't he leave her alone? He had pestered her into marrying him, and now she was fed up. Fed up, she repeated aloud, trembling with anger. Fed up, fed up. She heard the car draw up to the gate of their garden. He was coming up the stairs. Chapter 18. He came into the room. Her heart was beating wildly, and her hands were shaking. It was lucky that she lay on the sofa. She was holding an open book as though she had been reading. He took for an instant on the threshold, and their eyes met. Her heart sank. She felt on a sudden cold chill pass through her limbs, and she shivered. She had that feeling which you describe by saying that someone was walking over your grave. His face was deathly pale. She had seen it like that once more before. when they sat together in the park and he asked her to marry him. His dark eyes, immobile and inscrutable, seemed preternaturally large. Okay. Let's have a look at this one. Don't think I've met this word before. Remember the last one? Pusillanimous, whatever. Pusillanimous. Preternaturally. Okay. His dark eyes, immobile and inscrutable, seemed preternaturally large. He knew everything. "You are back early," she remarked. Her lips trembled so that she could hardly frame the words. She was terrified. She was afraid she would faint. "It's about the usual time." His voice sounded strange to her. It was raised on the last word in order to give his remark a casual air, but it was forced. She wondered if she saw that she was shaking in every limb. It was only by an effort that she did not scream. He dropped his eyes. "I'm just going to dress." He left the room. She was shattered. For 2 or 3 minutes she could not stir, but at last, rising herself from the sofa with difficulty, as though she had had an illness and were still weak, she found her feet. She did not know if her legs could support her. She felt her way by means of chairs and tables to the veranda, and then with one hand on the wall went to her room. She put on a tea gown, and then she went back into her boudoir. They only used the drawing room when there was a party. He was standing at a table looking at the pictures of the sketch. She had to force herself to enter. "Shall we go down? Dinner is ready." "Have I kept you waiting?" It was dreadful that she could not control the trembling of her lips. When was he going to speak? They sat down, and for a moment there was a silence between them. Then he made a remark, and because it was so commonplace, it had a sinister air. "The Empress did not come in today," he said. "I wonder if she has been delayed by a storm." "Was she due today?" "Yes." She looked at him now and saw that his eyes were fixed on his plate. He made another observation, equally trivial, about a tennis tournament that was about to be played, and he spoke at length. His voice, as a rule, was agreeable, with a variety of tone, but now he spoke on one note. It was strangely unnatural. It gave Kitty the impression that he was speaking from a far-away place. And at all times his eyes were directed on his plate, or the table, or to a picture on the wall. He would not meet hers. She realized that he could not bear to look at her. "Shall we go upstairs?" he said, when dinner was finished. "If you like." She rose, and he held open the door for her. His eyes were cast down as she passed him. When they reached the sitting room, he took up the illustrated paper once more. "Is this the new sketch? I don't think I've seen it." "I don't know. I haven't noticed." It had been lying about for a fortnight, and she knew that he had looked it through and through. He looked and sat down. She lay again on the sofa and took her book. As a rule, in the evening, they were alone. They played con or patience. He was leaning back in his armchair in a comfortable attitude, and his attention seemed absorbed by the illustration he was looking at. He did not turn the page. She tried to read, but she could not seem to print. See the print before her eyes. The words were blurred. Her head began to ache violently. When would he speak? They sat in silence for an hour. She gave up the pretense of reading, and letting her novel fall on her lap, gazed into space. She was afraid to make the smallest gesture or the smallest sound. He sat quite still, in the same easy attitude, and stared with those wide, immobile eyes of his at the picture. His stillness was strangely menacing. It gave Kitty the feeling of a wild beast prepared to spring. When suddenly he stood up, she started. She clenched her hands and felt herself grow pale. Now, I have some work to do, he said in the quiet, toneless voice, with eyes averted. If you don't mind, I will go into my study. I dare say you'll have to go to bed by the time I'm finished. I'm rather tired tonight. Well, good night. Good night. He left the room. Chapterino 19. XIX. As soon as she could, next morning she rang Townsend up at his office. Yes? What is it? I want to see you. My dear, I'm awfully busy. I'm a working man. It's very important. Can I come down to your office? Oh, no. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Well, come here then. I can't possibly get away. What about this afternoon? And I don't think it would be better if I didn't come to your house. I must see you at once. There was a pause, and she was afraid that she had been cut off. Are you there? She asked anxiously. Yes, I'm thinking. Has anything happened? I can't tell you over the phone. There was another silence before he spoke again. Well, look here. I can manage to see you for 10 minutes at 1 if you'll do that. If that will do. You'd better go to Kuchu's. I'll come along and see as soon as I can. The curio shop? She asked in dismay. Well, we can't meet in the lounge at the Cheyenne Hotel very well, he answered. She noticed a trace of irritation in his voice. Very well, I'll go to Kuchu's. XX. Is it a chapter? Also, we're still watching, yes. Watching the lovely beach. Chapter 20. She got out of her rickshaw in the Victoria Road and walked up the steep, narrow lane till she came to the shop. She lingered outside a moment as though her attention were attracted by the big bric-a-brac which was displayed, but a boy who was standing there on the watch for customers, recognizing her at once, gave her a broad smile of convenience. It's not convenience, though. Connivance? Connivience? I don't know. That's...
Connivance.
Connivance. My bad. A broad smile of connivance. He said something in Chinese to someone within, and the master, a little fat-faced man in a black gown, came out and greeted her. She walked in quickly. Chinese. If it's Hong Kong, it would be Cantonese. More up north, it would be Mandarin, I think, right? Mr. Townsend, not come in yet. You go topside, yes? She went to the back of the shop and walked up to the rickety dark stairs. The Chinese followed her and unlocked the door and led into the bedroom. It was stuffy and there was an acrid smell of opium. She sat down on the sandalwood chest. In a moment she heard a heavy step on the creaking stairs. Townsend came in and shut the door behind him. His face bore a sullen look, but as he saw her it vanished, and he smiled in that charming way of his. He took her quickly in his arms and kissed her lips. Now, what's the trouble? It makes me feel better just to see you, she smiled. He sat down on the bed and lit a cigarette. You look rather washed up this morning. I don't wonder, she answered. I don't think I closed my eyes all night. He gave her a look. He was smiling still, but his smile was a little set and unnatural. She thought there was a shade of anxiety in his eyes. He knows, she said. There was an instant's pause before he answered. What did he say? He didn't say anything. What? He looked at her sharply. What makes you think he knows, then? Everything. His look, the way he talked at dinner. Was he disagreeable? No, on the contrary, he was scrupulously polite. For the first time since we married, he did not kiss me good night. She dropped her eyes. She was not sure if Charlie understood. As a rule, Walter took her in his arms and pressed his lips to hers, and would not let them go. His whole body grew tender and passionate with his kiss. Why do you imagine he didn't say anything? I don't know. There was a pause. Kitty sat very still on the sandalwood box and looked with anxious attention at Townsend. His face once more was sullen, and there was a frown between his brows. His mouth dropped a little at the corners. But all at once he looked up, and a gleam of malicious amusement came into his eyes. I wonder if he's going to say anything. She didn't answer. She did not know what he meant. After all, he wouldn't be the first man who shut his eyes in a case of this sort. What has he to gain by making a row? If he'd wanted to make a row, he would have insisted on coming into your room. His eyes twinkled and his lips broke into a broad smile. We should have looked a pair of damn fools. I wish you could have seen his face last night. I expect he was upset. It was naturally a shock. It's a damn humiliating position for any man. He always looks a fool. Walter doesn't give me the impression of a fellow who'd care to wash a lot of dirty linen in public. I don't think he would, she answered reflectively. He's very sensitive. I've discovered that. That's all the good as far as we're concerned, you know. It's a very good plan to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and ask yourself, how would you act in his place? There is only one way in which a man can save his face when he is in that sort of a position, and that is to pretend he knows nothing. I bet you anything you like that is exactly what he is going to do. The more Townsend talked, the more buoyant he became. His blue eyes sparkled, and He was once more the gay and jovial self. He radiated an encouraging confidence. Heaven knows. I don't want to say anything disagreeable about him, but when you came down to the brass tacks, So that's the saying, eh? Brass tacks. A bacteriologist is no great shakes. The chances are that I shall be a colonial secretary when Simmons goes home, and it's to Walter's interest to keep on the right side of me. He's got his bread and butter to think of, like the rest of us. Do you think the Colonial Office are going to do much for a fellow who makes a scandal? Believe me, he's got everything to gain by holding his tongue and everything to lose by kicking up a row. Kitty moved uneasily. She knew how shy Walter was, and she could believe that the fear of a scene and the dread of public attention might have influence upon him, but she could not believe that he would be affected by the thought of a material advantage. Perhaps she did not know him very well, but Charlie did not know him at all. Has it occurred to you that he is madly in love with me? He didn't answer, but he smiled at her with his roguish eyes. He knew and loved that charming look of his. Well, what is it? I know you're going to say something awful. Well, you know, women are often under the impression that men are much more madly in love with them than they really are. For the first time she laughed. His confidence was catching. What a monstrous thing to say. I put it to you that you haven't been bothered with much about your husband lately. Perhaps he isn't quite so much in love with you as he was. At all events, I shall never delude myself that you are madly in love with me, she retorted. That's where you're wrong. Ah, how good it was to hear him say that. She knew it, and her belief in his passion warmed her heart. As she spoke, he rose from the bed and came and sat down beside her on the sandalwood box. He put his arms around her waist. Don't worry your silly little head a moment longer, he said. I promise you there is nothing to fear. I am as certain as I am of anything that he is going to pretend he knows nothing. You know, it's the sort of thing is awfully difficult to prove. You say he's in love with you. Perhaps he doesn't want to lose you altogether. I swear I'd accept anything rather than that if you were my wife. She leaned toward him. His body became limp and yielding against his arm. Her body, the love she felt for him was almost torture. His last words had struck her. Perhaps Walter loved her so passionately that he was prepared to accept any humiliation if sometimes she would let him love her. She could understand that, and that was how she felt towards Charlie. A thrill of pride passed through her, and at the same time a faint sensation of contempt for a man who could love so slavishly. Savishly. Something to do with slaves. She put her arms slavishly, I think it is, slavishly. She put her arms lovingly around Charlie's neck. You are simply wonderful. I was shaking like a leaf when I came in here, and you made everything all right. He took her face in his hand and kissed her lips. Darling, you are such a comfort to me, she sighed. I am sure you need not be nervous. And, you know, I'll stand by you. I won't let you down. She put away her fears, but for an instant unreasonably she regretted that her plans for the future were shattered. Now that all danger was past, she almost wished that Walter was going to insist on divorce. "I knew I could count on you," she said. "So I should hope. Oughtn't you go and have a tiffin?" "Oh, damn my tiffin." He drew her more closely to him, and now she was held tight in his arms. His mouth sought hers. "Oh, Charlie, you must let me go." "Never." She gave a little laugh, a laugh of happy love and of triumph. His eyes were heavy with desire. He lifted her and her feet to her feet, and not letting her go, but holding her close to his breast, he locked the door. Sexy time. I'm going to take a short break. Okay, I'm back. Chapter 21. Although the afternoon she thought of what Charlie had said about Walter, they were dining out that evening, and then he came back from the club. When he came back from the club, she was dressing. He knocked at her door. "Come in." She did not open. "I'm going straight along to dress. How long will you be?" 10 minutes. He said nothing more, but went to his own room. His voice had that constrained note which she had heard in the night before. She felt fairly sure of herself now. She was ready before he was, and when he came downstairs, she was already seated in the car. "I'm afraid I've kept you waiting," he said. "I shall survive it," she replied, and she was able to smile as she spoke. She made an observation or two as they drove down the hill, but he answered curtly. She shrugged her shoulders. She was growing a trifle impatient. If he wanted to sulk, let him. She didn't care. They drove in silence till they reached their destination. It was a large dinner party. There were many people and too many courses. While Kitty chatted gaily with her neighbors, she watched Walter. He was deathly pale and his face was pitched. "Your husband is looking rather washed out. I thought he didn't mind the heat. He has been working very hard." "He always works hard." "I suppose you are going away soon?" "Oh yes, I think I shall go to Japan as I did last year," she said. "The doctor says I must get out of the heat if I want not to go all to pieces." Walter did not, as usual, when they were dining out, give her a little smile glance now and then. He never looked at her. She had noticed that when he came down to the car, he kept his eyes averted, and he did the same when, with his usual politeness. He gave her his hand to align. Now, talking to the woman on either side of him, he did not smile, but he looked at them with steady and unblinking eyes. And really, his eyes looked enormous in that pale face, coal black. His face was set and stern. He must be an agreeable companion, thought Kitty ironically. The idea of those unfortunate ladies trying to indulge in small talk with that grim mask not a little diverted her. Of course, she knew. There was no doubt about that. And he was furious with her. Why hadn't he said anything? Was it really because, though angry and hurt, he loved her as much as he was afraid she would leave him? The thought made her ever slightly despise him, but good-naturedly. After all, he was her husband, and he provided her with board and lodging. So long as he didn't interfere with her and let her do as she liked, she would be quite nice to him. On the other hand, perhaps his silence was due merely to a morbid timidity. Charlie was right when he said there was no one who would hate a scandal more than Walter. He never made a speech if he could help it. He had told her once that when he was whatever that is. I don't think I've seen that in English, that type of letter. Subpoenaed. Is that the way you write it? Okay. Subpoenaed as a witness on a case where he was to give expert advice. He had hardly slept for a week before. His shyness was a disease. And there was another thing. Men were very vain, and so long as no one knew what had happened, it might be that Walter would be content to ignore it. When she wondered whether by any possibility Charlie was right when he suggested that Walter knew which side his bread was buttered, Charlie was the most popular man in the colony, and soon would be the colonial secretary. He could be very useful to Walter. On the other hand, he could make himself very unpleasant if Walter put his back up. Her heart exulted as she thought of her lover's strength and determination. She felt so defenseless in his virile arms. Men were strange. It would never have occurred to her that Walter was capable of such baseness. And yet, you never knew. Perhaps his seriousness was merely a mask for a mean and pettifonging nature. The more she considered it, the more likely it seemed that Charlie was right, and that she turned her glance once more on her husband. There was no indulgence in it. It happened that just when the women on either side of him were talking with their neighbors, and he was left alone, he was staring straight in front of them, forgetful of the party, and his eyes were filled with a mortal sadness. It gave Kitty a shock. Chapter 22. XXII. The next day, when she was laying down after luncheon dozing, she was aroused by a knocking at her door. "Who is it?" she cried irritably. At that hour she was unaccustomed to be disturbed. "I." She recognized her husband's voice and sat up quickly. Damn! She recognized her husband with only one letter, man. "Come in. Did I wake you?" he asked as he entered. "In a point of fact, you did," she answered in the natural tone she had adopted with him for the last 2 days. "Will you come into the next room?" I want to have a little talk with you. Her heart gave a sudden beat against her ribs. I'll put a dressing gown on. He left her. She slipped her bare feet into mules and wrapped herself in a kimono. She looked into the glass. She was very pale, and she put on some rouge. She stood at the door for a moment, nerving herself for the interview, and then, with a bold face, joined him. "How did you manage to get away from the laboratory at this hour?" she said. "I don't often see you at this sort of time. Won't you sit down?" He did not look at her. He spoke gravely. She was glad to do as he asked. His knees were a little shaky, and unable to continue in that jocular tone, she kept silent. He sat also and lit a cigarette. His eyes wandered restlessly about the room. He seemed to have some difficulty in starting. Suddenly he looked full at her, and because he had held his eyes so long averted, his dark gaze gave such a fright that she smothered a cry. "Have you ever heard of Mai Tao Fu?" he asked. "There's a good deal about it in the papers lately." She stared at him in astonishment. She hesitated. "Is that the place where there's cholera? Mr. Arbuthnot was talking about it last night. There is an epidemic. I believe it's the worst they've had for years. There was a medical missionary there. He died of cholera 3 days ago. There is a French convent there, and of course there are the custom men. Everyone else has gotten out." The hell is a customs man? I guess some dude taxes, death and taxes, some tax guy. His eyes were still fixed on hers, and she could not lower hers. She tried to read his expression, but she was nervous, and she could only discern a strange watchfulness. "Oh, excuse me. How could he look so sturdily? He did not even blink. The French nuns are doing what they can. They've turned the orphanage into a hospital, but the people are dying like flies. I've offered to go and take charge." "You?" She started violently. Her first thought was that if he went she would be free and without let or hindrance could see Charlie. But the thought shocked her. She felt herself scarlet. Why did he watch her like that? She looked away in amazement. "Is that necessary?" she faltered. "There isn't a foreign doctor in the place." "But you're not a doctor. You're a bacteriologist." "I am an MD, you know. And before I specialized, I did a good deal of general work in the hospital. The fact that I am first and foremost a bacteriologist is all to the good. It will be an admirable chance to do research work." He spoke almost flippantly, and when she glanced at him, she was surprised to see in his eyes a gleam of mockery. She could not understand. "But wouldn't it be awfully dangerous?" "Awfully," he smiled. It was a derisive grimace. Derisive, I think. Yeah, it was a derisive grimace. She leaned her forehead on her hand. Suicide. It was nothing short of that. Dreadful. She had not thought he would take it like that. She couldn't let him do that. It was cruel. It was not her fault if she did not love him. She could not bear the thought that he should kill himself for her sake. Tears flowed down her cheeks. "What are you crying for?" His voice was cold. "You're not obliged to go, are you?" "No, I'll go on my free will." "Please don't, Walter. It would be too awful if something happened. Supposing you died." Though his face remained impassive, the shadow of a smile once more crossed his eyes. He did not answer. "Where is this place?" she asked after a pause. "May Tai Fu. It's on a tributary on the Western River. We should go up the Western River and then by chair." "Who is we?" "You and I." She looked at him quickly. She thought she had heard amiss. But now the smile in his eyes had travelled to his lips. His dark eyes were fixed on hers. "Are you expecting me to come, too?" "I thought you'd like to." His breath began to come very fast. A shudder passed through her. "But surely it's no place for a woman. The missionary sent his wife and children down weeks ago, and the APC man and his wife came down. I met her at a tea party. I've just remembered that she said they left someplace on account of cholera. There are 5 French nuns there." Panic seized her. "I don't know what you mean. It would be madness for me to go. You know how delicate I am. Dr. Hayward said I must get out of Tianjin on account of the heat. I could never stand the heat up there. And cholera. I should be frightened out of my wits. It's just asking for trouble. There's no reason for me to go. I should die." He didn't answer. She looked at him in her desperation, and she could hardly restrain a cry. His face had a sort of black pallor which suddenly terrified her. She saw in his look a look of hatred. She saw in it a look of hatred. Was it possible that he wanted her to die? She answered her own outrageous thought. "It's absurd. If you think you ought to go, it's your own lookout. But really you cannot expect me to. I hate illness, a cholera epidemic. I don't pretend to be very brave. I don't mind telling you that I haven't plucked for that. I shall stay here until it's time for me to go to Japan." "I should have thought that you would want to accompany me when I am about to set out on a dangerous expedition." He was openly mocking her now. She was confused. She did not quite know whether he meant what he said or merely trying to frighten her. "I don't think anyone could reasonably blame me for refusing to go to a dangerous place where I had no business or where I could be of no use. You could be of a great use. You could cheer and comfort me." She grew even a little paler. "I don't understand what you are talking about. I should have thought it needed more than average intelligence." "You shouldn't have thought it needed more than average intelligence." "I'm not going, Walter. It's monstrous to ask me." "Then I shall not go either. I shall immediately file my petition." A petition for divorce, perhaps. Wasn't that what she wanted? Well, divorce. And to marry the Charlie fellow. Well, we shall find out the next time we read. It's been about an hour, and that's about it for the reading today. Take a small break and maybe come back with a game. Let's play some of this, shall we? Make some more money. Yes. Could upgrade these. Slightly better armor. Do some money. Get some money, then try the other one. Yes. Guess. Don't know, man. We'll see. See how much we suck. Yeah, okay. Oh, got hit. Bats have the nastiest positioning. Two lives. Oh. Didn't see that one. Something down here. What is this? Critical chance. Okay. Oh, again, Jesus. Too many traps. What's with all the traps? Oh, down. Yeah, got stuck there. Stuck in a corner of a cave. It is quite porous. Some traps there, huh? I see them. I see the traps. Rude. Jesus, more traps. Okay. As we reach to the thing. Create a totem that greatly buffs you. That's nice. Buffy totem. Damn. I'm quite in the rage now. Tiny bugs. What's that? Create an area that slows and damages enemies. It's probably even better. Got them traps there as well. Sounds like that guys from what were they? The aliens from Mars Attacks, I think. Mac. Increased luck. Well, lucky. Don't know what luck has to do with it. Okay. Keep moving. Also the traps. Oh, that's... Oh. some blood back. Come on. Come on, rude bat. Rude bat. Traps, lots of traps there. One of those assholes. How about you get some... Nice. Some totem power. Yeah, how about you staying alive? Like that? Assholes. Stuck. Guess I should use rage more. Oh, that was sweet. So many skeletons. No, okay. Are they damaged by those things? Not sure. I mean, I know they don't trigger it, but are they damaged? That's the question. Question. We'll leave that one. Keep some of our money. Whoa. Hate that you can't move while you do that. That's... It's not good. You have like a holdy thing as well when you... It's all the spiders, lady.
It was right here. The Bergson thought that this would be one final thing that they could do for the wolf cub.
Nah. Okay, I'm going to build some for Wolfie. Where the hell do I go next? Ah, come back and go up, I guess. Okay. Somewhere around here. Don't know why. Don't like going up.
Tired of being called shady, he instead adopted the title Mysterious Shopkeep.
And I'm the broken vase, sir. Guy that breaks the vases that nobody likes. Because nobody's complaining, so looks like they break. The vase is broke, I assume. Increased maximum health. Throw a trap that weakens enemies who enter into it. That's health. A ranged companion that fights by your side. Ah, that costs freedom. Brooch of Insanity. Greatly increases critical chaos and damages at all costs. But a cost to a slow, constant drain of health. Oh boy. That would suck. Sure. Just get that. More health. Let's go. Fight the big spiderino. Halferino.
All 8 eyes studied the one so willing to walk into their own tomb.
Let's just that. Cool, some health. Oh god damn it. Hey Death. How are you, sir? How are you doing? Wooden nails, okay.
Never would a wolf cub live in as nice a house as the one Ben was building. When asked what name to put on the house, Lucy yelled out, "Riker! Riker the wolf cub!"
Riker the wolf cub. is this? Kid is training now. Okay. What was the one? Okay. I guess I could try. Get more damage. See how we do in the new map. See how we die. Where do we die there? Does it keep the gemstone or something? It said 4 health. I don't know what that 4 there at the bottom is, but something. It's something. No, these gemstones. That little thing you got me? Boo. Some traps there. Oh, right, this is the things with the archers. Things fun with archers. Not close enough. More traps here. Metro 2033 is free on Steam at the moment. Into CDs. I might have it from. I have. Dodged you. I have a Metro free from. God. What's it face? Epic. It was free on Epic, I think. Jesus, losing so much life for the goddamn archers. Um, 2016 game. Yeah, from Epic. But one of them, no, I don't know which. I'm around to play too, if you need to. In this thing? Or in the... Metro thing? Eh. I don't know, probably die trying to do some... this. Slowed down for some reason. Losing some frames. Don't know why. Come on, you asshole. That game, Children of Morta, Metro is single player, I think. So Epic gave 2 of them free. I think I have at least one of them free. At least one of them is free. At least one of them I have. Could look it up. Yeah, the thing is, I'm not going to be. Corpses have less chance of being corrupted than spawners. Don't think I'm going to be playing that much longer. It's been a long day. Read my little book. Play a bit of this. And collapse. God damn this guy and his puddles. Corpses. Restore portion of your maximum health. Okay, sure. It's also a bit, I don't know if you can see it on stream, but it's losing some frames. Streaming on all 100 platforms does that, losing frames? It shouldn't, because I'm not using the same PC to stream. It really shouldn't. One PC is working with streaming. And not even that. Because I'm not streaming to 100 platforms. Restream is streaming to 100 platforms. I'm streaming to just restreaming. Oh, rude. Yeah. I couldn't stream to two things at once. Not enough internets for that, I'm afraid. Anyway, what have you been up to? What have you been playing? You don't play games?
In the darkest depths of the caves, further than a weary traveler dares to tread, lay the chamber of Nethereads and her golem. The first step toward the mountain god.
Mountain god? I have to dive long before I meet him. Ugh. It's dreadful. Come on. Ugh. This goddamn frame rate, I couldn't even. Yeah, for Metro 2033 Redux and Metro Last Light. The Steam one is a different, I think. Ah. More Metro. For the people that don't take the Metro, I guess. Or the people that enjoy Metro. Oh. That's a lot of you. Oh, Archerinos as well. I didn't even know there were like so many Metro games. I only thought there was one. Yeah. Just go to shows what I know. You know nothing, sir. Good day. I don't really use the rage ever.
The poor herbalist had no valuables, but the goblin's greed had now surpassed gold and jewels.
I almost want to say that Metro is like Fallout. There's a bunch.
Serve no one now. The herbs needed to be delivered to Mary.
Okay. Ooh, more of you. Oh, one of those big tall things. Oh, those things are going to kill me. That guy dies easier with some ranged stuff. Tall fellow. Yeah. Oh, that thing would give me more experience. Okay. That would be useful. And I'm going to die. Metro is about Fallout like PlayStation and Xbox. Ah, okay. I'll take it. Why not? Maybe one day might play it. Never bit one of those dudes with a non-ranged guy.
Mark was out of the woods now. His fever gone. He was.
We can all play the game 10 years from now. Exactly.
Welcome back, brother, said Kevin.
Sure. You have to let it age a bit. It's a classic. Yeah, it's like fine wine or stinky cheese. Let it stink up a bit.
He had avoided conflict over the years, living in harmony with nature. But as Uncle Ben was fond of saying, a Bergson would forget how to walk before they forget how to fight.
So I guess a new character. Yes, we found ourselves a fourth dude to play with. Mark is an available character, I think it said, yeah. He will now stand by his family's side to fight. Lovely. Lovely, lovely. Stinky cheese metro games. Okay, dude. What's my highest Carter level? It's 10, I think. Can look it up. If I select one. So here's 10. Linda's 5, the archer lady. Kevin is 6, the guy you played with. And Mark, the new one. And I guess you'll have 3 more if you come from, if you look at the shadows there. I don't know what the little leaves there mean, but this guy has 4 leaves. Might mean something to somebody. There's the skill points. To upgrade them and stuff. Maybe. And you didn't get another dungeon yet? No, but I haven't been playing that much. I played today for about an hour, yesterday for about an hour. This wants you to grind. Want you to grind, sir. Time for me to go, though. See you later, alligator.